much for inviting me.
No, it's my great good pleasure. I really want to find out about BAI, and I want to find out about Bernard White.
Okay.
Okay. And welcome very much to Conversation. A pleasure to welcome to the program a fixture around New York City, I would say, particularly in the progressive community, and that'd be Bernard White. And his title now is he's the program director at radio station WBAI. I think a lot of people are aware of that. And Bernard, welcome really very much to Manhattan Network and maybe Manhattan Network. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a template I like to use, and we're going to be talking about the human condition and communication and all that sort of thing, but I like to sort of anchor it on the person. Could you share your own background, where you were born and raised, that sort of thing, some of your education, and then there's a way to wade into a discussion of communications and progressive communications, politics, human condition, that sort of thing. But your own background, please, if you would.
Well, I was born right here in Manhattan, on the island of Manhattan. Sometimes folks ask me, do I come from the island? And I tell them, yeah. I come from Manhattan. I was born in Harlem Hospital back in 1946.
Okay.
Went to school, of course, in Manhattan. Went to Frederick Douglass Junior High School, very important junior high school. James Baldwin also went there. And not at the same time, of course.
Yeah.
But after that, my parents moved from the projects. I grew up in the Lincoln Projects.
Where is that?
132nd Street, Madison Avenue.
In Madison, okay, yeah.
So I grew up in the projects, and we moved out to Queens back in 1960.
Okay. And I don't mean, it's how old were you when you moved to Queens?
About 14.
14, so you had gone through your formative years there.
Yeah. My junior high school was very important. I had some excellent teachers. I had a teacher named Miss Williams and one named Evelyn Jarrett, and they were very interested to make sure that all of the students that they had learned how to read and write and to think.
Okay.
And much of what they taught me helped me all the way through high school.
Okay.
I finished English early in high school because of the background that I had from them.
How about in the family? What was the family setting? Were they intellectually encouraging and that sort of thing, and education-minded and so forth? I mean,
well, my parents, both of them graduated from the 8th grade. They only had an 8th grade education. And
in New York?
No, in the South.
They were coming up from the South, part of the migration.
South Carolina, right? And they moved northward and met in New York.
Okay.
They lived, I would say, 20 miles from each other. They didn't know each other.
Right.
But they met in New York and they got married. And their expectation was that I finish high school.
Right.
Because that was it for them. And they weren't too familiar with colleges or college education.
Right.
So they never really encouraged it. They didn't discourage it, but you know, my father in particular felt that I would take my good high school education and get a job working for the city and get the benefits.
I was talking with my friends and my dad and mother. They were born in the turn of the century, right? And I happened to look at it, and it was only something, and when they graduated high school, they went on to profession and that, but when there was something only like 40, I think I saw a statistic, only something like 40% of the population of the country graduated from high school. Now it's just taken as a given, almost, you know what I mean? Everybody goes to college almost, they're able to, but just a thought.
Yeah. Another thought about that, too, is that, you know, now you have the high school equivalency, which I think kind of lessens the strength of high school education. When we were there, we had to do work. I also wound up teaching. I'm leaping ahead now.
Yeah.
And I remember preparing for Regents exams. I mean, really studying hard, because part of the Regents exam was also that you write in complete sentences, because you had to, you know, that was a part of your mark. And when I wound up marking some of these Regents, you know, we were told to just, if you understand what the student meant to say, even though the sentences, even though the words strung together are not sentences, that you should give them a favorable mark.
And that's a degradation of quality standards in your view?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, okay.
Because then teachers don't teach as hard, too. because they know the student doesn't need it.
When you were in school or education, was it a pleasurable thing for you to be in the school? Did you enjoy it? Were you enjoying the process of being educated and so forth? Or was it a drag? A lot of people, I see a lot of people say they compare high schools to a minimal security correctional facility. A lot of people have that attitude.
Not when I was there. When I played basketball in high school.
Oh yeah, what, guard or?
Guard and forward.
And forward.
People were a lot shorter than me. So I wound up playing forward too.
Yeah.
And so I had to get in there and hit those books, so that I could play on the team.
Were you, okay, you had to set a certain academic standard to be able to be on the basketball team, the high school team. Was the hitting of the books a pleasurable thing for you, or was it a grind?
At times. It was more pleasurable in junior high school.
The higher you got, the more pleasurable?
No, it was more pleasurable in junior high school as opposed to high school, because of the teachers that I had. They made the things come to life. You know, I had one teacher who really loved Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
And as a result, I wound up falling in love with Charles Dickens.
Yeah, it's a good person to fall in love with,
Oh,
particularly if you want some sort of sense of social conscience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Dickensian is a...
That's right. It's a part of the language now. And so we read a lot of Charles Dickens books and had a lot of discussions about the social fabric of the United States at that time. So that was very exciting. The other part, I did it because I wanted to play ball, and it wasn't as pleasurable.
You mean in high school?
In high school.
It wasn't as pleasurable then?
No. But it was pleasurable when I finally went on to college. I graduated from Queens College.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
What did you study then?
I studied administration.
Administration. You want to get in public policy and administration? Yeah, okay.
I wanted to learn how to run agencies.
Okay.
And that was more pleasurable. I was much older then.
Yeah.
I went to school after work. It was kind of difficult, but it was something that I wanted to do. Many of my friends had gone on to school right after high school.
That's the normal pattern.
Yeah.
If you can manage it. Yeah.
Right.
You had to work your way through?
Right. We didn't have any money.
Good for you. Good grit. Hard grit. Abraham Lincoln.
It was hard because sometimes I had 2 jobs and worked. I had a family by then. I got married early.
I see.
And
those are just pickup jobs or something? They didn't have some sort of a career path or something?
Not the career path that I wanted. I would, if I heard about something that I could make a decent salary at, I tried for it.
Yeah.
Generally, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you political all along, or did you pick up your political orientations, or was it in the crib? Was it all through the school, or what?
Well, it was probably in the crib. My father was very critical.
Okay. Of the society?
Of the society.
Okay, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Too bad there's hardly anything left to be critical about. Now that we got George Bush at the helm.
Absolutely.
Everything's fine.
Everything's wonderful.
Yes, right.
the best and the brightest.
Yes.
But my father was very critical. He had a very bad experience when he was in the military. He was stationed in New Guinea, and he always told the story about how the black soldiers were used to, he was a part of a detail that built airports. They put down the runways
sort
for
of like
the airports.
Seabees or something.
Yeah. So they would go out and clear off the land so that they could put down this landing strip.
Yeah. Okay.
And while they were out there, the Japanese were just picking them off.
Yeah, turkey shoot.
Like crazy.
Yeah.
And they would send out a crew in the morning and bring back the bodies in the evening. And finally, he said he's not going out there to just, that they
go out there and get shot.
Right. Yeah. And he wrote a letter home to his mother and told her about it. And they intercepted the letter, and it made his life miserable.
No fooling.
Yeah.
The authorities did.
Yeah.
Was the service was that Korea, or was that Second War? That was Second War.
Second War.
Was it segregated then?
Oh yeah, it was.
The military was segregated.
Yeah,
Can you believe it?
He was in a black unit.
Yeah.
In fact, I met a lot of his army buddies because although none of them really liked the war, they had developed this relationship that they kept
camaraderie
all of their lives.
I mean, like a camaraderie. That's important. It's good to have that, particularly. Yeah, that was good. I did some program. A fellow named Weinstein did a thing with Bullard. Did you ever hear of Eugene Bullard?
The
He
name
was
sounds familiar.
he was really good. He came out of Georgia, turn of the century, and went to Europe and everything. And he actually won the highest award. He was a black man out of Georgia, no education and everything, and he worked his way up, became friends with Baker, Josephine Baker, and a lot of others. But he'd been military, flying ace, and he set all kinds of records. He won the Croix de Guerre, or something, the highest thing France can give and everything. He was over there, and you didn't have the racism in Europe that we had from our thing. And the guy said the only thing that Pershing brought to Europe was Jim Crow. You know, that kind of thing. It was better over there. But he's a person worth paying attention to. Bullard, B-U-L-L-A-R-D. But anyway, but even in the Second World War, it was still there. Did you have to do the military?
No, I avoided the military.
I don't blame you.
The lessons that I learned from him
That kept you once
me
burned,
avoid the
right?
military. And then, you know, I was also paying attention to what was going on more so than my contemporaries. You know, I used to read what was going on and try and figure out what was this they were talking about in Vietnam. So I had a pretty good knowledge of I would say better knowledge than they had about what was going on and what soldiers were being used for. And I determined then that I was not going to fight for the United States.
Yeah, I went in for whoever. I'm older. I went in Korea. It was a Korea time. Thank God the war.
The Korean conflict. It wasn't
yeah,
a war, right?
police action.
Yeah,
we haven't fought a war since the Second World War. I don't know how that works. They're supposed to be Congress declaring the war, but it just seems these executive things go off on police action. But I didn't like the military at all. It was I took a voluntary draft to get it out of the way. But everybody, it was conscious. It was in the air. You were going to be drafted. It was just part of the thing. We don't have that now. Mike Gravel really helped to get rid of that draft. He was one of the major forces that, you know, during the time of Vietnam, they got rid of it. But it was just one of the things. We don't have that now, but you were able to stay away from that. Your politics, you grew up, when you were in high school and so forth, were you politically inclined? Malcolm, Martin King, and that sort of thing? Or
in fact, when I was in high school and I was playing basketball, once I realized that, you know, chances of my becoming a pro were very slim. I began to, you know, because each summer I used to play in a lot of the tournaments around the city.
Right.
But I think in my junior year, I decided that I wasn't going to play in a tournament. And they were building a housing complex in Queens called Rochdale Village, which was a large co-op apartment. I think it was the second largest next to Co-op City in the Bronx. And they weren't hiring any black construction workers. And me and some friends of mine, we got together and we would go out and picket every day to draw attention to the fact that
What year would this have been, just roughly?
This was 63.
63, things were hotting up. Things were starting to hot up.
It was a year after Kennedy was assassinated.
Right, wasn't that something else? Yeah. And so you did that, and then that was, okay. Did you know Stokely Carmichael?
I've met him. I've met him several times. In fact, the last time he came to New York, we sat down and we talked. I gave him some books, because, you know, we were always getting books at WBAI.
Do you remember what you gave him? Maybe it's not fair. There's a lot of books.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. But,
he would have taken. He had a very eclectic thing.
Oh yeah,
he's great. Okay. And so you got involved from that side of things and everything.
Well, I didn't get I didn't get involved directly with the Panthers, but I was interested in them. But I thought that I didn't like the way they spoke. You know, there was
it was a heady time.
Cursing.
And did you get involved in any of the freedom rides and that kind of stuff, or anything down south and that kind of stuff?
No, I didn't get involved with that.
Okay.
But I did get involved with a lot of the things that were happening around the city.
Okay.
In fact, I would go to a lot of the demonstrations and just watch what was going on, because I was very much interested in seeing what was happening, the relationship between the police and the demonstrators.
Right.
And invariably, it was, whenever there was any conflict, it was, from what I saw, it was the police that started it, that they were the ones who were the aggressors, and that the people responded, and then once the people responded, they wound up being some kind of major disturbance. And I remember whenever that would happen, I would rush home in the evening to see it on TV. And
You wouldn't see it.
not only would you not see it, what you did see was totally wrong. It was interpreted incorrectly.
180 degrees off.
Yep.
Yeah.
That it was that the protesters rioted, and the police did everything they could to
Be
try and
restrained
them.
and everything,
Yeah.
but then they finally had to come to the defense of their
Right.
comrade and all of that.
And
Yeah.
that
It's
was
called
not
propaganda.
Well, yeah. And you know, I felt that one of the things that was happening is that the people who were doing the reporting really didn't know or understand what was going on, and that I wanted to get into do news and
just straighten them out.
to straighten them out.
And I used to try and tell the sergeant in the Army, look, why don't we do things more democratically? They didn't want to hear that, though. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you
Only to find out.
Was that naivete on your part?
Total.
Okay.
Total naivete.
Right.
Because you know, it wasn't until I finally made my way into a newsroom that I realized that many of them didn't care, that they would just rip and read. And the official story always came from the police. That became the official story.
And it's a metaphor for things coming from on high by the power structure that runs things. And that's a metaphor for the planet. And it relates to local and all the way up and down the line.
All the way up, all the way up and down.
And also there's a metaphor in time. We have a time-space continuum or something. We have a metaphor through time because it seems to me it's always been a few people who are sitting up there in the castle running things, you know.
And they're not the people that we voted for either.
Right.
You know, there's the government that we elect, there's the elected government, and then there's those folks who get selected.
Yeah. Did you get militant in your soul?
Yeah.
You did. Yeah.
Well, you know,
and when did you start picking up on a militancy in your own, you know, perception of the environment and so forth, or, you know, because you know what I'm saying?
Well, for me, it happened with the.
Was there anything personal that happened to you that's triggered it, or was it just a growing understanding? Because you said you started getting into administration, public policy,
Well,
so that's a different kind of thing. You wouldn't have to necessarily be in any kind of an idea about the injustices that exist to be doing things with some institution that didn't have a relationship to that issue, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay.
For me, it happened with the murder of Emmett Till.
Okay, yeah, oh God. Yeah.
It was, my father used to go out, as many black men did at that time, to the barbershop every Saturday.
That's a great social gathering.
And you know, that's wherever you could go there and catch up on all the events that took place during the week. And of course, they would have heated political discussions.
And fun, funny, funny.
A lot of laughs.
Yeah.
And he brought home one morning after coming, it was one Saturday morning, he brought home the Jet magazine.
Yeah.
And I could tell that he was upset, and he passed it to my mother, and he said, you should read this. And she read it, and she started crying and went into the bedroom. And so I wanted to see just, you know, what was this all about?
The
so
report
I picked
about
up
Till.
I picked up the magazine, and I saw this, what looked like a paper mache mask that was broken in some places.
It was him.
It was him.
Yeah.
A really grotesque
absolutely.
form. And when I read what happened, it kind of scared me. I carried that Jet magazine around in my pocket for about a week.
How old
and
you are
only
now?
look
When
at
did that happen? Can you remember?
That
roughly?
happened about 57. I must have been about 10 years old.
That's informative at time. Yeah. So you're picking up on a militancy, deep-seated.
Well, an anger.
Radical anger.
That turned into a militancy as you begin to recognize that that could very easily have been you.
Yeah, or your buddy.
Or your buddy, and you know, because he whistled.
Yeah,
because they
uppity.
used the term.
He's being uppity.
They used the term wolf whistle. I didn't know what a wolf whistle was.
You didn't cast down your eyes at the right attitude or something, like all of that kind of stuff. It's better that you picked up a militancy, it seems to me. You say anger. Anger turned inward can be depression and ennui. Better to be militant, it seems to me, in the face of that sort of thing, than allowing that depression, the absurdities of the human condition, that you turn it on to self-hatred and depression. Understand?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lesson in that somewhere.
I would agree.
By humanity at large, I would say, yeah.
I was constantly trying to organize folks who had grievances, you know, that we would get together and unify and present our grievances and try and pressure to bring about some kind of change. And a lot of times I wound up being out there all by myself. You know, I remember working down on Wall Street.
You worked, okay, we'll get to that. Yeah, go ahead.
For Bayesian Company. And I was in the purchase and sales department at that time. And, you know, that department would resolve any conflicts in trade at the end of the day between the American and the New York Stock Exchange.
Okay.
And I worked on the New York Stock Exchange. And we would be working there, and most of the folks that I worked with were men from the Caribbean, and as well as black men from the United States. And a young white male would come in, and we would train them in what we were doing, and then they would disappear.
They would go
and
where?
then they would come back a month or two later as our supervisor.
Yeah, right.
And come back asking us,
Yeah.
you know, how do you do this and how do you do that? And I would always tell them, you're the supervisor, you tell me how to do it, which wasn't taken too favorably.
Another metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, many of us had the same complaint. So I said, well, you know, we should do something about it. We should organize ourselves and, you know, write up a petition and sign it. So
The we being what? I heard you say men of color or something.
Yeah.
Were there a lot of men of color or something where you were working?
Well,
or you were working in the belly of the beast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I, once
It was
again,
for
I
money.
didn't know what
You
you know.
Well, were you getting militant then, or were you, you know?
Well, the militant, not so much militant, but determined to try and do something, determined not to endure the condition that I was in.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's something that would be that would go right through the whole human condition. I mean, myself, but that's another issue. I see. Yeah. Okay.
So, you know, I wrote up the petition based on what we all had agreed were the issues, and I brought the petition in the next day and passed it around. Had somebody take it around, and it came back to me, and it had no signatures on it.
None at all.
So they said, everybody, you know, nobody wants to be the first one to sign it.
Yeah,
They,
or even the second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they said, you know,
Follow
why
me.
don't you sign it? So I signed it.
Okay, good.
And it went back out, came back, and I was the only signature on it.
Wow.
So, you know, I started to talk
What
to the
What were the
guys.
consequences of that? Anything?
No, we never handed it in.
Oh, I see.
So there were no
No, I
consequences.
hear what you're saying. No, it can be kind of lonely.
It's
the
been
first one over
been
the
that
top.
way a lot. You know, a
Yeah.
lot of people complain, but when it comes time to really trying to do something, confronting those people that they're complaining about,
It's also
they back
hard.
off.
Yeah, it's also hard because it's systemic. The whole system it is. You know, maybe there could be, if you can get, it's like, you know, they just assume they got a system, and everybody in a sense is co-opted. You got to pay rent, don't you? You got to have food. You got kids. You got to do all of that kind of.
Those
and
are
it's a great
those are the
co-optive-
excuses that were given. You know, one guy, I just bought a house.
Right.
I can't, you know, I don't want to jeopardize that. And I didn't understand that then. I was kind of angry, but, you know, I understand it now.
Yeah. When did you pick up? Now you're BAI now. You picked up a political bent or a thing in the Pacifica. Maybe we want to get over to that because you're program director there now. And BAI is a really important source of information, alternative information also. So maybe you could segue over into when you got involved with communication. And particularly, specifically, maybe BAI and maybe, what do you call it, Pacifica and that sort of thing, if you could.
Well, in addition to wanting to work in the newsroom, I also wanted to be a DJ. And I would go out to, I went to announcing school.
Okay, you got a good voice, yeah.
Well, thank you. I went to the New York School of Announcing and Speech, and I graduated from there. And then, you know, I noticed that once you graduate, they made it very easy to get for you to get the loan. But once you graduate, then they want you to go to Podunk, Iowa and you know, I wanted to be here in New York. So I went to the black radio stations here in New York, and I wasn't able to get too far.
Did you know Percy Sutton at all?
I know it's Pepe and I, Pierre Sutton and I were classmates. So I knew
his
him.
son.
Yeah.
No, I was
who's
talking about
running BLS now.
Yeah. But I was thinking of his dad.
Well, I met his dad on several occasions. But
The chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah, inner city broadcasting and that, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
And they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't give me an opportunity at those stations. And once I got inside, I recognized that the DJs weren't really playing the songs that they liked or they wanted to play. They had to play from a playlist.
A playlist,
So
like
that's
Clear
not,
Channel or something.
yeah, that's not creative. So and that's when I really decided, okay, then I want to get into
What kind of
news.
music do you want to play?
At that time, it was the whole Motown.
Motown. I'm
Stuff,
from Detroit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're from the Motor City.
Yeah. You like that, right?
Yeah. In fact, that whole beat came out of the factory.
Yeah. The assembly line.
yeah,
Charlie Chaplin on the assembly line.
Yeah.
Yeah, my granddaddy was a union organizer, turn of the century in Detroit. And they fought like demons in the 30s, man. They were breaking heads and everything when even the AFL-C industrial unions came. But Detroit, but anyway, that's off the track. But you were trying to get into broadcasting then.
Yeah,
and
so I was trying to get into broadcasting. I had to, since I couldn't do that, I wound up getting some other jobs. I worked a variety of different jobs. I must have had at least 50 jobs.
50?
Oh, yeah.
50?
All kinds of jobs. I remember the strangest job I had. I worked for one day.
One
day. For the Juice Corporation of America.
Juice?
Juice Corporation
Juice.
of America. Doing inventory.
Yeah.
In the freezer. I had to put on a coat, a hat, and gloves.
Mucklucks? Mittens.
To do this inventory.
Yeah.
But I had some friends who were working at WBAI. Well, when we say work at WBAI, they were volunteering at BAI. And I always wanted to go down to BAI, but I just didn't have the time. Finally,
we're on the 8th Avenue then, or where were we?
Yeah, they were on 8th Avenue.
That's right around the corner from where I live.
They were on the church, over at the church on, I think, 61st Street and 1st Avenue.
What was that on 8th Avenue?
They moved.
Oh, they did after the church.
After the church,
okay, right,
over there.
Right.
So by the time I got over there, they were on 8th Avenue.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Kofi Pendergrass, who died, he was a producer at BAI, and I told him that, look, man, I'm unemployed, and I want to come over.
I've been to announcing school. I got a good rich voice, baritone. Got some thoughts. Yeah.
So he told me, he said, well, look, call this guy and see what you can do. So I called Samori Marksman.
Yeah.
And I gave him, I told him what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. And
what was it you said you wanted to do? Were you doing the music or the commentary or what? Political work?
No, I told him I wanted to work in the newsroom.
Work in the newsroom, ripping and reading? Or
no,
what?
Not ripping and reading.
What?
Learning. I just wanted to learn how to do news.
Okay.
I told them that I liked what they did. Yeah. I noticed that whenever they covered any of the demonstrations that I was at, they were pretty accurate in assessing what took place, and that I wanted to do that. So he told me to call this guy named Robert Knight.
Rob Knight, I know. Yeah, Robert. Yeah.
Who at that time was the news director. And on November 22nd of 1980, which was Thanksgiving Day, he said, why don't you come on down next Thursday, right? So I said, next Thursday, that's Thanksgiving. And then I said, well, this is BAI, and they don't.
Thanksgiving.
They don't go on these ceremonies.
Yeah, right.
So Thanksgiving Day,
well, what a better day to go on your pilgrimage on Thanksgiving. It was you marked the day well.
And I've been there ever since.
Did you get a chance to get some turkey that day or not?
Oh yeah.
Back with the family, you could fit it in, right?
Yeah.
So you can fit these things in more than you might think, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, good.
But I
and the world has been benefited ever since.
On that day, I got in. I did a story. I remember it was I think it was a Soyuz 7. Russia was launching this spaceship, and I wrote something about. And with this spaceship, Russia launched the idea or something that they would have the longest trip. And he liked it, and I guess for
Robert Knight. You're talking Knight, yeah.
Robert Knight and another guy named Tony Cabin, and I gave it to Tony. He liked it, and Robert went along with it, and I think every day for about a year, I went to WBAI, just trying to soak up as much.
So you weren't on mic yet, or you were?
No.
On mic? You were writing for others.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's important.
I wasn't in a hurry to get on the mic.
Okay.
because I didn't think I knew enough.
But you'd been to announcing school.
Yeah, but that...
You weren't ready to just get on there and start telling the
No,
world?
no.
No. Okay.
I wanted to get as much information.
You wanted to get it home.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to be very comfortable.
Had you been to the public administration thing, or that thing you studied at university about organization or something?
Yeah.
You'd been through that also, so you had a sense of organization and systems sort of thinking. Okay.
Right.
That's good.
And so, you know, I tried to learn. I started reading like crazy, and I found that enjoyable, you know, because it was what I wanted to do.
There is a lot. Oh, you mean reading on the air?
No, I started reading some
books.
background information about Central America. I read the North American Committee on Latin America. Their reports,
great. Yeah.
the NACLA reports. I started reading about some of the history of the relationship between the U.S. administration as well as the U.S. businesses, because they paralleled with Latin America as well as around the rest of the world.
Getting educated.
Yeah.
You had a base for that, but you were getting it honed. I mean, in terms of a critique, and reaching back to your daddy's roots, maybe.
I give him a lot of credit for it. And then I just began. I was paying close attention to what people were saying. There were a lot of people coming through who had a lot to say, and they would also stimulate you to do further research, because I began to realize too that because someone says something that sounds good, that makes you feel good, it doesn't mean that you need to just embrace that as being truth.
They got a whole advertising industry along that line.
That's right. That's right. You need to also
tell you what I'm going to do. You're going to be fine. Just listen to me.
That's right. So I did that, and I remember Valerie Van Isler, who was the head of the International Affairs Department, wanted me to come and work with her department, and I kept telling her for about a year that I'm just not ready. I'm just not ready for that.
That's interesting. You were coming in slow, right?
Yeah, I didn't want to. I didn't want to blow it.
Did you have a sense of career? Did you have a sense of honing your craft? You really were getting yourself ready to. You found home. Did you feel like you'd found a home in this whole genre, or this whole movement, or this way?
Well, I was beginning to feel that way based on the responses.
You were happy with what you were doing.
Oh, I loved it.
You loved it. Okay, that's important. I think, don't you? Yeah.
You know, in fact, I would tell my wife at that time that I was going to the station and I'd be back. 5, 6, 7 hours would go by.
3 or 4 days. I went out to get a bottle of milk and have been on the radio ever since. Yeah.
And you know, and just in doing, trying to learn how to do a story with a beginning, a middle, and an ending.
Okay.
And then there was the art of radio too.
Yeah.
There was the mixing of sounds and creating emotions and feelings in people that I also tried my best to learn.
Yeah, well, I was raised on radio. We didn't have any television.
Right.
I can remember when there was no television. You're too young to remember.
Oh no, I remember.
You remember when
in
it was
the projects.
Fran and Ollie?
Oh yeah.
I can remember watching Test Pattern.
Winky Dink and You.
I don't remember that one. I think
well,
I missed
Winky
that
Dink
one.
and Me.
I missed it.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then the trouble is we only got an hour. We could talk for hours and hours and hours. We can make a whole documentary about Bernard White and everything. You worked with Pacifica. WBAI is part of the Pacifica Network.
Right.
Amy Goodman you worked with, who's become a star now and everything like that. Maybe you could talk about some of the people you worked with, and when did you first get on mic, and when did you start working with Amy? And then we got an executive director, a really good guy, Dan Coughlin, who was at the WBAI. Maybe you could talk about some of that.
Okay. And
then we want to talk about BAI as an institution.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Amy and I began to work together. Well, I got an opportunity to do a morning program because someone had gone out of town.
On mic?
On mic.
Is that the first thing you did?
The first thing I did was I was working during the fund drives. And I was working with Valerie Van Isler, finally, doing some international stuff. And in front of us, they used to have a sheet where you'd read off pitching points. You know, we're listener sponsored, our rent is this, and the electric bill is that, and we need your help to help us to pay that so we continue to work. And I went through the whole sheet, and I looked up, and I was in the studio by myself. And I knew that there was something called dead air, and
Uh-huh.
that was a no-no. That you couldn't have dead air.
It's like black on
Right.
television. Yeah.
Yeah. I also knew that if I read that paper again, people would think I was a complete idiot. So that was my feeling anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
So then I had to begin to speak. So I started to talk about why
Off the top of your head.
right,
Yeah. Rather
why
than
I
reading.
came, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
why I came to WBAI and what it meant to me
In this empty room
in this empty room,
to a microphone.
which is a strange, for people who haven't done it, it's an extremely strange
Yeah.
feeling at
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
because you feel that you're talking to yourself.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's not till later that you realize that you're talking to other people,
Yeah.
or at least to one person
That's
other
the
than
medium,
yourself.
like we're doing here now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So then I got kind of comfortable. After that, I got kind of comfortable behind the mic, and I started to do engineering slots for a variety of different people. And I got an opportunity, and then Tamori gave me a program called Emanations.
Marston. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and where I would go out in the community and gather all kinds of sounds from a variety of different forums, bring them back, mix them with music, and try and give people an experience, trying to place them right in the front row seat of whatever conference or presentation
Yeah, there's
was
a
being made.
creativity to the way using just there's no visual, it's audio, but there's a creativity that's involved in terms of that. Yeah.
So I did that, and it was
Prairie
pretty,
Home Companion.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
they made a movie out of it.
Yeah, I know, isn't it great? Meryl
Yeah.
Streep, I think is in it.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
quite a few
He's so
folks.
funny. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
So
it's an art form. Yeah.
it
Yeah,
really is an art
definitely,
form.
yeah.
I haven't had, well, I'll get to that, but as a result, and you know, proximity is good too. And when you're there, I mean, no one's going to ask you to do a show if you're not there.
That's the beginning.
You
Yeah,
know?
it's pretty good to be there to begin with. Yeah, yeah.
So there was the World Forum or something that took place in Latin America.
Social forum?
No, it wasn't social forum.
No.
Then. This was about the environment.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And the person who was doing the morning program, he went down to that forum, and I got an opportunity to do the morning show for several days in a row. And there was a very positive response that came from the audience. And you know, many folks wrote letters, many folks made phone calls because of my approach to the morning. So then
What was there about the approach, do you think? It was was there a spontaneity there, or what?
there was a spontaneity as well as a creativity. You know, I finally got an opportunity to share all of those books and pamphlets and stuff that I was reading.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
you know, and also
And you found when you
talk
opened your
about
mouth, when you opened your mouth, good thoughts came out.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, right.
And also, you know, because of my work in the community,
Yeah.
I knew a lot of folks, and I would bring them on the air, and we'd talk about.
Now, were you
community
talking
issues.
cultural? Were you doing? You said music. Were you doing culture? Or were
We're
you doing
talking
political?
with
Well,
both.
your thing, the bent of what the message was that you were addressing when you started being. Was it It was political and cultural, and
It was political and cultural.
okay.
It was
yeah.
both, and in
Okay.
fact, I think it's difficult to separate the two. I mean, that's
Okay,
my
that's interesting.
feeling.
I think you might be right on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, as a result of that, there was some talk about us starting a morning show and getting someone to come in. And I was asked on several occasions, would I be willing to do a morning show? And I told them I couldn't do it without getting paid. They want you to volunteer to do a whole week
A lot of it's
mornings.
volunteer. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So finally, Pacifica began to realize that we were losing a lot of audience to National Public Radio.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they had consistency in the mornings.
In the morning?
In the morning.
Okay,
Their
interesting.
morning program was consistent.
Yeah.
Their afternoon drive time was consistent.
Right.
So they wanted to start in all of the 5 stations a morning program.
Worth mentioning to the audience, we got the Pacifica Network started in San Francisco, and BAI started after that. But there's 5 stations that are sort of a network, Pacifica Network.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning that.
Yeah, Pacifica started in Berkeley, California with Lou Hill,
Yeah, right.
who was a pacifist, and BAI joined back in the 60s.
So it's sort of a progressive national radio network.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
That was determined not to take corporate sponsorship.
Okay.
So,
Radio listener supported.
hmm
Okay.
yeah. So when we see, there was talking about Pacifica.
BAI, your morning show,
Oh yeah, so
drive
the morning
time,
show.
the
Um,
consistency.
right.
And
So they said that they wanted all of the stations to have morning programs. They didn't give any resources for it, but we were supposed to establish a morning program. So they asked me if I would do the morning show, and I said, if you, if you could pay me.
a little
So
something.
then they said, well, look, what we'll do is we'll give you a half salary,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's successful, this was in October, and if it's successful, we'll give you a full salary.
Uh-huh.
So I was willing to take that chance because I had a feeling, I was sure that it was going to be successful.
You knew it was going to be successful.
And this was my opportunity. Now,
Step up to the plate, young man. Yeah.
here's something
Yeah.
that I don't share with people too often.
You can share it now with the whole wide world.
Okay.
Yeah.
That they asked me, well, the program director at that time, who wasn't Samori Marksman, it was another program director, I guess about a week before the start date, he says to me that you're not going to do the morning show alone. Amy Goodman's going to do it, and she's going to be your supervisor.
Did you know her at that time?
Yeah, I
got
knew her, but we didn't. I didn't know her well.
Amy's been on the scene for a long time. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was there when she came to WBAI.
You remember the day she walked in the door?
It was a pretty uneventful day. So, but
She's become a star now.
I know,
You understand?
but
yeah.
she when he told me that, I said, "Oh, fine. I'm not doing it."
You said that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was because you didn't want the mixed
No, it was because they had been trying to get a successful morning program for years, and it was always unsuccessful. And I wasn't going to work under anybody else.
I see.
I'd work along with someone, but I wasn't going to work under anybody in order to put this program
Sounds
together.
to me like you have a certain kind of mindset that I admire.
Yeah.
Yeah, you like to work with people.
Right.
Not. Yeah, I don't like hierarchy.
No, I don't particularly care.
I don't
for it
like
either.
authoritarian.
I think everyone has a role.
I used to try and
and we
explain
should-
that to the sergeants.
Not a good
As a
move.
private, I mean, not as a lieutenant. Yeah, that whole hierarchy thing sets me. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So what happened?
So he didn't believe me until I just said, well, I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
So I stopped doing all the work in preparation for it, and finally a meeting was called with me and Amy and the station manager and the program director at that time to try and resolve it. And he wanted to know what was the problem. I told him there was no problem.
I can understand it right away. Yeah.
I'm just not going to do that.
Uh-huh.
So Amy and I began to talk, and we decided that we would work together, and if there was anything that I didn't like, that we wouldn't do it. If there was anything that she didn't like, that we wouldn't do it.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a synergy. The means of a synergy. Yeah, that can be a creative.
And
yeah.
Prior to that, we had said very little to each
You
other.
got to set limits there a little bit. Somebody's going to do a little something different. You got to have a little, like if you're playing the saxophone a little too loud or something, you got to have a little bit of an understanding there and that synergistic equation.
But you worked that out.
Yeah,
You worked
right.
that out.
Yeah, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of creativity
But-
goes into that space. Yeah,
Yeah, but when you
Yeah.
enter into it, you have to know that we're all equal.
Yeah,
we're gonna
right,
move
right,
forward.
right.
And then
right.
you'll work out your strengths.
That's one of the
will
great things about
determine.
music. If you're playing music, you want the guy to play the best he can possibly
Right.
play, and there's a
Yeah,
vibe there.
yeah.
They call it vibes, in the music world. And it's very real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your strengths will, you have to allow for your strengths to move
Yeah,
forward.
yeah.
So we did. I was the one who pretty much kind of shaped the program, because my feeling was that it should move, that it should be continuous, that you go from sound into sound,
Right.
and that you take people on a journey even in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah, you've got a really nice voice. It's baritone like that. Yeah, you did that enough. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
so We did, and after the first program, I said, I think we got something here.
You did the first program? Do you have the date of that?
No, I don't.
You should have that recorded. Is it on tape? Is it on tape?
You know,
you should call it up. That would be great.
We were so
Memorable event, you know.
We were so naive then
Yeah.
about what it was we were doing. We
Don't
didn't
lose
keep,
the
we didn't keep
naivete
any
if
records.
you can help it. Don't lose naivete if you can help it. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
We didn't keep any records,
Yeah.
and we didn't tape the show. And then once we started, you know, with the analog tape, it became a big, you know, those big bulky reels. It's crazy. So we still have a lot of them. We almost lost them at one time.
Get those into a vault somewhere.
Yeah.
Well,
I gave a lot of them over to Amy to transcribe and to digitize.
Good. Okay. Good.
So
yeah. There's a great deal in that. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and we did. You know, the program was very successful, very popular. We had a lot of people that came through. We had a lot of people who came in to volunteer. We did, you know, both international, national, and local issues. We tried to show the connections between them. We introduced a lot of people to a lot of music that they don't normally hear.
Okay. Can you mix music in? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Now, one of the problems is, Bernard, we only got about 10 minutes left.
Really?
Yes, it goes so fast when you're having fun. But it goes like that. Now, BAI, tell it to some of the audience that maybe people aren't aware of it. What would you say if, you know, the BAI, what is its raison d'etre or its philosophy and so forth, the programming that goes, you're director of programming now. How would you characterize the programming as a whole pattern, as it were, and everything, of the radio station WBAI?
Well, every program director that comes along inherits.
Yeah.
We inherit a schedule that has been fashioned and shaped by a previous program director.
Right.
So what we try and do is to put our imprint on that schedule. And
you incorporate it, subsume it?
Well, you try. See, what happens in listener-sponsored radio, it becomes very difficult to make change.
You've also got a lot of egos involved, I think, don't you? Or do you ever have a problem? Do you ever have a problem ever with ego clashes?
Oh, gee. Sometimes it's hard to squeeze into the room.
Yeah.
There'll only be two people in there, but the egos are so enormous. It's hard to squeeze
people with
in.
fairly strong views, right?
Oh,
or you see the
really?
Trotskyites, you talk with Trotskyites, the Shockmanites, and how many angels can dance on the head of a dialectical, materialistic interpretation of a dance.
Primary, secondary, and tertiary contradictions.
All of that, yes. And another big fat toe, mister, you know, that kind of thing. I understand. But overall, it's a progressive is a good term for it.
Yeah.
They have a progressive. They're trying to, and progressive is a word that should have a dictionary definition or a meaningful definition. It's like generally trying to set and improve the society, particularly for the least advantaged among us all, toward a democratic kind of process of equity among the peoples that make up a society or something, right?
And getting information out to people and relying on them, their intelligence to make proper decisions.
Okay,
You know, the more informed people are, the better decisions they'll make. What has happened to WBAI, though, and some of the changes that we have made, is interesting. When you go back to the 60s and 70s, the
great times,
really great times, really great radio.
Okay,
and but the majority of the staff of WBAI was white and male.
Okay.
And it's interesting.
Not an unusual pattern in this society.
Oh, no.
It's inherited.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was considered to be just the radio station.
That was authority, yeah.
But since that time, we've included people from the community, from other groups.
Barbara Aziz is there?
Barbara Aziz
is
there.
You have Michio Kaku on a regular...
Michio Kaku is there.
He's brilliant.
Yes, he is.
He really is, yeah.
We've also had some other folks from the black community, from the Latino community, who have come in.
Feminists?
We have
a feminist program. Down there? Yeah. Animal rights?
Animal rights program.
Yeah, you got a wide umbrella, they call it.
Very wide umbrella, which also makes it very difficult to raise funds because, you know, the more diverse you are, it becomes difficult.
Yeah.
It's much easier to raise funds if you do strip programming.
It would be easier if you raise funds for Chase Manhattan Bank or some establishment organization. You know, like, you know what I mean?
Who would
like
love to give us money.
Uh-huh.
They would love to, but, you know, we're right in the middle of the FM dial, which means people get us going back and forth.
No, but if you're on the progressive side of things, it isn't exactly the most lucrative kind of big fat cats that are ready to put a lot of money into something that's going to support the status quo.
You're being
and
kind.
if you're talking about something progressive, you know.
You're just being kind.
No.
They don't want to have anything to do with it.
They don't.
No.
They wouldn't. They wouldn't. No,
because eventually
you're talking
we
about
would wind up
change for the
talking
people.
about them.
Yeah.
You know, and some of the ways that they exploit the people.
Yeah.
And they don't want to take a chance on that.
Well, it's like what happened when first the issue of civil rights came up, women's suffragettes and all the kind of things where they're trying to expand the number of people and diversity of the people, people who are in favor of the status quo or benefiting by it or institutionally connected to a status quo don't want to hear about change because they're sitting pretty. I mean, that's a general thing in terms of the way the world operates.
Yeah.
Or has. And maybe we're coming to a time where we're going to have to subsume that in a large-scale way in terms of bringing a pattern that's going to be really qualitatively transforming the human condition. When we get to a point, as Michio Kaku tells us, that we can destroy the whole bloody species with the weapons that exist now. Something new is blowing in the wind, don't you think?
Yeah.
And it needs something positive on the other side, liberation or something, that is the corollary of the situation in which we find ourselves. And it's going to come out of alternative media like WBAI, and I would submit public access television as well.
Well, and I agree with you.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
Big
that's where because I think that it'll come from that, because that's where the real issues are, and that's where the reality of what's going on is going to be discussed. It's not going to be discussed on these other stations.
I think it's just almost the way the universe is set up, is that you're not going to have the people that are responsible. The people at Versailles with those big wigs were not able to understand the fact that there was an industrial revolution coming and there was a change coming. They couldn't understand it. I mean, because they thought they were an Android regime. People got their identity by the system that had been in place. Fugitive slave laws, for crying out loud, they had. You know? And the world changes and the technology changes. The new possibilities emerge. That old system might have to be subsumed or transformed fundamentally itself, and yet they think they've got a thing for the ages, particularly now. Fukuyama writes a book and says it's the end of history.
And change is very different.
Yeah.
Very difficult for people. You know, one of the things that you know, in my view of WBAI is that in order for that change to come about, we have to have everybody on board.
All right.
So we have to understand what is going on in a variety of different places.
That's right.
So what you have is that there's something going on in the black community and the Latino community, a level of repression that is that's becoming very crystallized.
Just shot down that other fella with 52 bullets.
That's right.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we have some members of the WBAI audience who feel that the station is becoming too black. And what I started to say earlier, in the 60s and 70s, when it was all white and primarily male, it was just a radio station. You put a few black folks in the mix,
real people,
and all of a sudden it becomes a black radio station.
because you got some.
Because you got some.
Yeah.
The majority of the people who are doing work at WBAI are still white people. But there's this perception that once you introduce that, then it becomes a black radio station.
Well, it's a
so here we
Rainbow Coalition is what Mr. Jesse talks about.
Yeah, and
I mean,
I think we have one.
On a world scale, that's something that's really happening, and it's beginning to happen on a world scale. There are a whole lot of people that have been left out. You know, you got a leadership element and everything that owns all the assets, that kind of stuff. It's real. Mr. Carter, our ex-president, I saw him on television, and somebody asked him, do we live in an elementally just world? And he said, absolutely, of course not.
Right.
You got people, you know, so there's a lot of change.
He just wrote that book about Israel.
He did, yeah. There's you're going to get a lot of problem in New York City. There's a lot of Jewish people that are Zionist inclined and that kind of thing. You're going to get a lot of people, if you criticize that, they take that very, very, because they suffered losses in that Holocaust and so forth, and that's a very deep issue.
But see, they did suffer but many people have suffered.
I
And
would say the American
everybody,
Indians suffered a bit.
absolutely.
And there was a black man or two that suffered, didn't
Right.
they? You know,
One or
they used
two.
to have this thing called chattel slavery, for crying out loud.
And everyone needs to be able to tell their story.
Uh-huh.
They need to be able to tell it, and so that people understand it. And for instance, I was saying that, you know, what's happening in the black community. I predicted there's going to be an explosion in the black community.
You predict that not from this day? I mean, from now you're talking?
From now. Because the ingredients, as Malcolm X once said, the ingredients for an explosion are there. People are not going to continue to be the targets of the police and not respond in some way.
Is it a metaphor for the world? We have we have a world, and we're beginning to reach out. We have a world where it serves maybe the top 20% live well in gated communities increasingly. Mr. Stiglitz will tell us 80% of the world population is not served, and the trends are not good in terms of helping to bring the least advantaged of the world into some sort of a reason. They can't realize their full biography, let alone their full potentiality. There's some really major changes that are needed if we're going to have something that offsets the existential reality that we have weapon systems that can destroy the whole ball of wax. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
It's a crucial time. It's not your normal time that we live in.
No, it's
not.
You
sense that?
I sense that, and I sense that, you know, we're living at a time too when media is so extremely important, and it's being so restricted. At the same time, it's growing. There's an interesting contradiction there, because corporate media is becoming more and more restricted, and it is forcing these other types of media to pop up. And what they need to begin to do is come together and try and develop some way of getting information out to people.
That's absolutely
But you're right. It is a metaphor for what's going on in society, and because you know, the Palestinians aren't able to tell their story.
Well, the poor never have. The rich or the winners write the history always.
The victors always write the
history.
history.
That's those news reports you saw about what happened in the day that you saw, and you go home and they write it, and it's completely different than what was the reality. Yeah, right. So that story can be told and be the basis of an alternative system for operating things. You know, one of the problems is, it's a time-space continuum, is we run out of time. We've run out of time for this hour, Can you believe it? I'm really sorry. And we could go on talking. One of the things that joining up between WBAI, the spirit of WBAI and the spirit of public access, because we have a wide thing, are in a similar ballpark, don't you think? And
well, we're both under attack, for sure.
Yeah, and we're both looking for comprehensive answers and so forth, and getting the word out. So this has been 1 hour. There could have been 20 hours easy. We could have talked on and on and on. But Bernard, thank you really very much.
And thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming in, not only for coming in doing the program and that, but also for a very well-led life up to now that's only getting better.